Afternoon. It's just been great to be in the presence of God today, hasn't it? Just to really sense the Holy Spirit moving. And really, I just want to say, to see you sitting on the front, Anna, it's just such a blessing. So, you know, the whole church family are right behind you, and God's already answering those prayers. We know that. We know that. Well, Ben actually said that we started our Disciple Dilemmas series last week. If you were really listening carefully, actually a few weeks ago, I'd like to claim that I started, because I spoke a message about Mary, Martha and Lazarus, and I think they were disciples of Jesus as well. But nevertheless, this is the official Disciple Dilemmas message with the official logo as well. So thank you to Pete for getting that sorted. Often, if Danny Ilke were here tonight, whenever I get a tough subject, he always comes up to me and he always says, "John, it's always you that gets the tough subject." Well, it is. Now, I have to say, I am talking tonight about a fairly difficult subject, but I've got to put my hand up and say I actually volunteered for this. So I'm not blaming anybody else in the preach team for saying that they hadn't. It's not that they hadn't got the guts or the bottle to preach this, but I actually felt that I should speak about this. So I can have the next slide, please. I'd like to introduce this because we are tonight talking about two of Jesus' main 12 disciples. We're going to be speaking about Matthew, who I said was a traitor who became a treasure. And then we're going to be looking at Judas, who I've said was a treasurer who became a traitor. I was really proud of that little strapline when it came to me. So I'm going to just leave it on. We'll come back to that once or twice, just to really kind of reinforce it on you. So Matthew, a traitor who became a treasure, then Judas, a treasure who became a traitor. We've got to be really careful that we're not seen as a church to be promoting a particular TV series. And particularly when you're talking about the disciples, it's really easy to do this. But I have to put my hands up, and if we can have the next slide, Daz. Because I have to say, for those of you that have seen the TV series The Chosen, a lot of the characters really come out well. Now, we're not in any way, as a church, saying that this replaces the scriptures. We're not in any way saying that this is absolutely as it was, because the one thing we'd guarantee is that it's definitely not exactly as it was. But I do know that many people have found this TV series really helpful and a way of kind of coming to the gospel story from a fresh angle. And that's really what I want to try and do tonight, to look at these two characters. And I've just kind of put that picture up there. Those of you that haven't seen The Chosen, that is actually the actor who plays Matthew, the tax collector. Firstly, you'll see how young he is. That kind of really strikes me. And it is thought that nearly all of Jesus' disciples, the 12 that followed him, were really young men. Some of them are teenagers, early 20s. And Matthew there, as you can see, is depicted as being quite a young man. So we're just going to get into the scripture. This is from Matthew's Gospel. And I just want to read to start with the scripture about Jesus calling Matthew. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees, the church leaders, saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners." I'm really glad that Jesus came to call sinners and not the righteous, because that's where, let me tell you, that's where all of us are sitting today. Jesus came for us. Jesus came for us. So this character of Matthew, in the TV series, I'd probably say that Matthew is probably my favourite character, because the quirky depiction that they show of Matthew is really quite extraordinary, and it's caused me to look at Matthew through a completely different lens, and I realise it's just a possibility that this is how he is. But in the TV series, Matthew is depicted as being clever to the point of being a genius. He's one of these guys that can just look at some figures and straight away know what the answer is. That's how he's depicted. He's depicted as a person with no interpersonal skills whatsoever. He's a real loner. He's an isolated guy. The way they depict him, it's quite probable that he's suffering from both OCD and also PTSD at the same time. Paul, if you think you've got that, mate, perhaps you relate to this character today. He's got issues with hygiene. He's a germophobic. He's kind of really stressed out about this. He doesn't like any form of human contact at all. You can see him kind of flinching if anybody kind of touches him at all. His whole body language is that he's just totally screwed up inside. I just do not think he would have coped with COVID. You know, he'd have been one of the people that wore kind of 10 masks and washed their hands till they were red raw. That was just a possibility. He might not have been like that at all. The TV series might be doing him a real disservice. But somehow it's helped me to kind of look at Matthew in this way. What is undoubtedly true about Matthew is this. He was despised by his fellow Jews. He was hated by the people that he was living amongst. His family would have disowned him when he became a tax collector. He would have been an outcast from society. He would have been excommunicated from his synagogue. They wouldn't have allowed him to go into the synagogue. Because he was a traitor and a tax collector, he would have been disqualified from acting as a judge. He wouldn't even have been allowed to be a witness in a trial in the Jewish court. They wouldn't have considered his testimony in a trial as being worthy of even listening to. If any of you have studied kind of more recent history, you'll perhaps know how horrifically people who collaborated with the Nazis in the Second World War were treated, particularly at the end of the war. That there was vengeance in quite horrific ways. Many, many people were murdered and tortured because it was perceived that they were collaborators. Matthew would have been of that ilk. It's also certain, well, pretty much certain, that Matthew, of all of Jesus' disciples, he probably stood to lose the most in answering the call of Jesus. When Jesus said, "Follow me," he got the most to lose in material terms. We know categorically that Matthew, as a very young man, owned his own house. The Bible tells us that. Jesus went to Matthew's house straight after he called him to have a meal. Matthew was a very wealthy young man. Matthew would have been on the take. Let's be blunt about it. He was a tax collector. And the way that things worked in those days was that the Romans, who had occupied Israel, they were the conquering army of the time, and they came in and they took control of Israel. This is factually correct. The Romans awarded contracts to tax collectors, and they actually awarded the contracts to the person who bid the most money for the privilege of actually being a tax collector. They wanted their tax. They had no concerns what was added on top. They had no concerns about how these tax collectors were treating their fellow brothers and sisters. As long as the Romans got their money, they were happy. They didn't care what the tax collectors did, and the tax collectors would have put a bid in to get the contract, and they would have been making as much money as they possibly could over and above the taxes that they should have collected for the Romans. So, why on earth did Jesus recruit this particular man? He was asking for trouble by asking him to be one of his followers. There's no two ways about it. This man would have been pretty much loathed by the other disciples. Yet Jesus saw him, called him, and said, you are going to be one of my 12 closest followers. And we know that Matthew just came straight away and left everything to follow Jesus. Jesus had a guy in his gang called Simon the Zealot. Now, Simon, as a zealot, was actually a kind of a terrorist of his day. He would have been a guy that was prepared to kind of fight and probably murder for the cause of liberating Israel from the Romans. Simon the Zealot and Matthew would have been at absolute extremes. They'd have been absolutely opposite. It would be a little bit like Jesus today, perhaps getting somebody and going down to London and going to one of the pro-Palestinian marches and getting the guy that absolutely, completely supports Hamas, and then going and getting the guy that's absolutely pro-Israel and putting them together. It would have been like going back into the 70s, going to Ireland and getting the staunchest Catholic and the staunchest Protestant and putting them together. He was kind of playing with fire when he put these two people together. It's quite probable, not completely certain, but it's quite probable that Matthew was actually the brother of James the Lesser. There were two James in Jesus' gang, and there was one called James the Lesser. And it's thought quite probable that Matthew could have been James's brother. Now, if that was the case, undoubtedly there would have been a dispute and a split in the family. So Jesus was recruiting somebody that had fallen out with his brother, and he was putting that toxic situation also into his group of followers. Why was he taking on all this baggage with someone who at the very best would have been incredibly challenging for the rest of them to come to terms with, and probably the worst, someone that they would have absolutely loathed and detested for what he'd done? Well, the reason is this. Jesus saw in Matthew something that the others couldn't see. Jesus saw in Matthew something the others that couldn't see. Jesus saw a traitor who was going to become a treasure. Matthew wrote the Gospel of Matthew, unsurprisingly. Now, when you study the Gospel of Matthew, it's been called the most Jewish of all of the Gospels, because one of the big themes of Matthew's Gospel is Matthew loves in actually showing how Jesus fulfilled all of the Old Testament prophecies. Nearly almost every other verse in Matthew saying he did this because actually it was prophesied hundreds, thousands of years before that this is exactly what the Messiah would do. Matthew demonstrated that Jesus was God's own son. Matthew demonstrated that Jesus was the Messiah by constantly referring and proving the prophecies that Jesus fulfilled. Matthew had been a taker. He'd been on the take. But he was called by Jesus to a life of giving. He was actually called to be the opposite person to the person that he'd been. What about us? Why did Jesus call us? I believe that Jesus sees in every single one of us things that we may not see in ourselves. Jesus may call us to do something that we feel absolutely ill-qualified, ill-prepared for, out of our depth. But somehow, Jesus puts his hand on us and he says, no, I'm calling you for this purpose because I can see something in you that you can't necessarily see in yourself. He certainly sees things in others that we can't see in them. When we look around, feel free to look around, you might not see things in each other that Jesus does. So I'd urge you, if you consider yourself to be part of Spring's family, when you look at the people in the family here, try and see them as Jesus might see them, rather than in the natural. You know how annoying we can all be, how we can rub up against each other and, for goodness sake, why can't we do it differently? Well, let's just say, Jesus sees, I'm going to say it, Jesus sees greatness in all of us. And I don't mean greatness to make us big-headed, but Jesus sees people that are great in this church. And I want you to look at each other through that lens if you possibly can. Matthew gave up everything to follow Jesus. It would have been incredibly costly for him from a material point of view. One comment that I read as I was preparing for this message, which I just really loved, and I'm going to leave this with you, is this. One commentator said this: there was only one thing that Matthew took with him from his tax booth, and that was his pen. Because he chronicled everything. He wrote the most comprehensive gospel in many ways. He was used by God. And I just hope that you found this little introduction to Matthew really helpful. So we're now going to move on to the next one. That one there. Again from The Chosen. I'm not going to talk about The Chosen anymore, other than to say that just happens to be the actor who portrays Judas in The Chosen. So let's look at the scriptures, or some of the scriptures, about Judas. Okay? Again, this is all from Matthew's Gospel, various chapters of Matthew's Gospel. We start with a story. I've just got to put this into context because this is really important. We're just going to pick this reading up, and we've just heard about a woman that came to Jesus just before he was about to be betrayed and crucified. And she'd actually broken an alabaster jar of really expensive ointment over Jesus' feet. She'd wept over Jesus' feet. She'd anointed him with this beautiful oil and actually washed his feet with her hair. And then some people are grumbling, saying, why on earth have you allowed her to waste all this money? And this is where we pick this up from verse 10 of this chapter. Aware of what the people have been saying, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Now, the reason that we need to read that little bit about this woman that made this expensive sacrifice is that the way that Matthew portrays it, this wasting in other people's eyes of a precious resource was the trigger that caused Judas to betray Jesus. Okay? Because we carry on. The very next verse in the chapter is this. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Skipping a little bit into it. Jesus goes, he has the Last Supper, he institutes the communion service, all of the disciples are there, and then he sends Judas out. And then they go to a place called Gethsemane, which was a garden. And we pick up the reading here. While Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With Judas was a large crowd, armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. Jesus replied, do what you came for, friend. Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. Jesus is taken away for trial. The trial goes on. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people made their plans how to have Jesus executed. So they bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. I've sinned, he said, for I have betrayed innocent blood. What is that to us? They replied. That's your responsibility. So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. What a sad story. What a sad, sad story. Now, I want to just explain. If you just want to get one of the pictures on, please, Daz, that would be great. That's great. Thank you. I'm now going to just talk about Judas and kind of bring this message into land. in a few moments' time. But I want to explain to you that I'm, for this part of the message, I'm taking a very, very traditional biblical view of Judas, because the Bible has quite a lot to say about Judas. The Gospels leave little imagination as to how the other disciples viewed him after he'd betrayed Jesus. Okay, and he is betrayed, and the Gospels talk about Judas as being a cheat, a traitor, a thief, possessed by the devil, the lowest of the low. In a more traditional translation, he is called the son of perdition. Judas is portrayed as being an outright evil character. And I'm actually taking that viewpoint for this part of the message. Now, having said that, if I'm honest with you, I do actually have some sympathy for Judas. There's something about the character where I kind of have feelings for this guy that fell so much. Some commentators, you can read if you Google Judas, some commentators will say, well, Judas was used and abused. But for the purpose of this message, I don't want to go down those particular alleys because it's speculation. And quite frankly, I don't think it will do us any good. I think we'll end up more confused if we kind of look at the two possibilities of there are two sides of Judas. So I'm really looking very, very biblically, which I think is the way to do on a Sunday. I'll just give you one example, though. You can't argue with this. Jesus alone knew what Judas was going to do. There's no doubt about it in my mind that when Jesus called Judas, he knew that he was going to betray him. The other disciples had no idea, but why did Jesus still call him? I have no idea, but that opens up a whole range of questions which perhaps might be more appropriate to be discussed in life groups rather than on a Sunday. But that's just one little illustration as to the dilemmas that this character of Judas brings. Why on earth call somebody that you knew was going to betray you? I don't know the answer to that. But that's just the conundrum. But as I say, the mainstream narrative is this. Judas betrayed Jesus. This is what the Bible says about Judas. It says he sold his soul to the devil. It says he sold his soul for 30 pieces of silver. It says that he betrayed Jesus. It says in another part of the gospel that he was a thief, that he actually was stealing money from the communal pot. It says that he actually invited Satan to enter him. It tells us that he hung himself. The Bible, in certain parts, seems to indicate very clearly that Judas went to hell. All of those things are covered in the Bible. So what can we learn about Judas? What can we learn from Judas? Does it frighten you? Does it frighten you that someone so close to Jesus could betray him? Does that worry you? Judas was personally chosen to be an apostle by Jesus. He presumably gave up everything that he had to follow the Lord. He spent 3.5 years traveling the length and breadth of Israel with Jesus. He saw all of the miracles that Jesus performed. He heard all of the amazing teaching and sermons that Jesus preached and taught. He watched people being healed. He watched people being raised from the dead. He watched demons being driven out of people. He went out, and as far as we can tell, Judas went out and preached the gospel when they were sent out in twos. One of them was lumbered with Judas when they went out 2 by 2. He was one of the leaders. He was never, ever suspected of treason. In terms of experience, whatever you can say about James, about Peter, about John, about Simon, and all of the other disciples, you could say the same about Judas. He had exactly the same experience. Everywhere they went, he went. He was right there. He heard it all. He saw it all. He experienced it all. You can't say he was less experienced than the other disciples. If anything, he was one of the leaders because the other apostles chose him to handle the money. You don't pick a man whose loyalty you suspect to handle the money. You pick your best man. They probably thought he was the most appropriate person for that job. That's why they picked him. The other apostles only saw the positive side of Judas. Before he betrayed Jesus, he looked as good as any of the rest, and in fact probably looked better than them. So, do you, in your darkest moments, just for a second perhaps fear that you yourself could do something similar? Do you feel that you could betray Jesus? I want to tell you this, and I believe this categorically. I want to tell you not to worry, because the very fact that it concerns you indicates that it's something you're not going to do. I really believe that. The fact is this: Judas was not a weak, backslidden Christian. He wasn't ever a Christian at all. Judas didn't lose his salvation because actually he never had it in the first place. Whatever else you say about him, he was never a follower of Jesus in the same way, in the same sense that the other 11 apostles followed Jesus. Judas was not saved and then lost. He was lost because he was never saved in the first place. Judas was a hypocrite. Now, I want to say that in the traditional sense of the word hypocrite. He pretended to be someone he was not. The word hypocrite comes from the Greek for actor. That's what they called actors. They were hypocrites, actors. And in the Greek kind of theatre tradition, someone playing a part was given a mask. So if you were a Greek actor and you were playing a part of one of the gods, you'd put a mask on which depicted one of the gods. And then, as you changed character, you just popped another mask on. And that was where the word hypocrite comes from. And that's what we mean about someone pretending to be something they are not. Judas, basically, I believe, pretended to be a follower of Jesus when actually he had no saving relationship with him at all. Because actually, if Judas had really known Jesus, if he'd really known him, he would have realized that even after betraying Jesus, he could have received forgiveness. I'm absolutely convinced that Judas could have gone back and sought forgiveness. Look at Peter. Peter denied Jesus 3 times the night he was betrayed. He received forgiveness. Paul went about killing people just because they followed Jesus. He received forgiveness. In more recent times, a couple of 100 years ago still, but a guy called John Newton was a slave trader. He received forgiveness from Jesus. I believe it could have been available to him. But Judas didn't have that saving knowledge of Jesus. The Bible tells us that Judas was full of remorse for what he'd done. Judas actually said, "I've sinned." But actually just being full of remorse and saying I've sinned isn't good enough. I believe our prisons could be full of men and women who are sorry they're in prison, sorry they got caught. It doesn't necessarily mean they're sorry for what they did. True repentance involves acknowledging that it is God himself who you've grieved. Let me repeat, that's really important. Real repentance involves acknowledging that your sin is against God, not against other people. It might involve hurting other people, but actually the real sin is when you've sinned against God. Judas said, "I've sinned." You may recall the story of King David, he was a pretty good sinner. He did some pretty terrible things. But he received forgiveness because King David actually said this, "I have sinned against the Lord." Judas said, "I've sinned." King David said, "I have sinned against the Lord." And those 3 words are the most important 3 words. They're vital. You have to be in a relationship with God to realize that you've sinned against him. And when that is the case, then forgiveness is available to you. Now, I'm really conscious that today is Mother's Day, and you may have been coming expecting a Mother's Day message today. You haven't got that, I'm afraid. In fact, I don't think we've even mentioned it, have we, Ben? Because it's all slipped off. Never mind, Ben. We are conscious of that, guys. But this message needed to be preached tonight. I really believe that. So I want to end, and the band can begin to come back now, because I want us just to have a time of reflection on this message. But I want to ask you this. If you consider yourself to be a Christian, if you know that you have a relationship with God through Jesus, I just want to challenge you. Are there any areas of your life that are still contrary to what God's perfect will is? To put it bluntly, are there sins against God that you know you need to get sorted? I also want to give you the opportunity to respond to the gospel. Perhaps you realize that actually you've been a bit of a hypocrite. You've been playing a role, but you've not actually made that decision yourself to follow Jesus, to have a personal relationship with him. I don't want to make a big appeal tonight. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's appropriate for, to get people coming out necessarily, although this front pew is always available for people that want to come for prayer. But I just want to give you the opportunity to let God speak to you and to convict you in whatever way he wants to. God is in the business of turning the greatest of traitors into a true treasure. And that's what he wants to do tonight. No matter how you feel you may have let him down, no matter how you may feel that you've been hypocritical, God's message for you tonight is this: I want to turn you into a precious treasure. So just respond to him in your own way. We'll just let the words of a song wash over you. Just spend a few moments quietly contemplating this message this evening. Thanks so much for listening.